And so again, shepherding is a key role, a key thing in the minds of the people. But then also, God talks about corrupt leaders being false shepherds. That comes out in Ezekiel 34. There were people who were the leaders of the nation of Israel who were supposed to be serving the flock, serving the sheep, but instead they served themselves. And they were horrible, bad shepherds. And God gives them a word of rebuke because their concern is not with the people, but with their own benefit. Ezekiel 34 and other passages talk about leaders being bad. When they're not serving the people, they're being bad shepherds. So here, this rich imagery, this rich history that Jesus catches on to and uses. And in fact, in the book of Micah, we have a situation where God talks about the people as the flock and the leaders as the shepherds. Micah chapter 2, verse 12 says, I will surely assemble all of you, O Jacob. That's the phrase for Israel. I will gather the remnant of Israel. I will set them together like sheep in a fold, like a flock in its pasture, a noisy multitude of men. So both parts of this analogy come together in Micah chapter 2, which, by the way, is that book of the Bible that's used around Christmas time for the imagery of the shepherds in the shield and in the field, I should say. The prophecy about the town of Bethlehem where Jesus would be born. And then verse 22 of John tells us that these things happened at the time of Hanukkah. Now, Hanukkah is sometimes in some translations called the Feast of Dedication. It's sometimes referred to as the Festival of Lights. Now, there were numerous festivals that God put in place, and you can look in the book of Leviticus, chapter 23 lists them, and I think Exodus chapter 20 lists some of them as well. But this particular one does not come out of those three key festivals that the Lord appointed, but another festival that developed at a later time in Israel. And this is important because of its history. It tells us a little bit about how it was celebrated at the time of Jesus. You see, during the time of Alexander the Great, the Israelites, who were supposed to be serving only God and keeping themselves pure for Him, fell into the way of thinking of the Roman Empire. They came under the sway of the secular thoughts of the people. And basically, Israel became very Hellenized, which is a way of saying they became very Greek in their culture. And in some ways, more Greek than Jewish. And that was offensive to some leaders, but well accepted by others. Well, certain leaders realized the problem of Israel swaying away from God and becoming like the people, and God seemed to have raised up the Maccabees, in particular, who we read about in the period between the New Testament and the Old Testament, the apocryphal books. You see, and the Maccabees came and they brought back a commitment to Yahweh, the God of the Bible. Brought that back to the people. And part of doing that, they had cleansed out the temple, which had been defiled by Gentile practices. I'm giving you kind of a brief summary of this. But basically, the Maccabees led the people out. And after the Maccabees had done that, that's when the Feast of Dedication, or the Festival of Lights, or whatever you want to call it, Hanukkah, began to be celebrated. You see, it was about the cleansing of the temple. It was about the fact that God had rebuked some false leaders. And so when Jesus gives this imagery of the shepherd and the flock, then He's giving it in the sense in which people are remembering false shepherds. In fact, in that time, in the synagogue, you would commonly hear the prophetic passages that rebuke false leaders, false shepherds, being taught in the synagogues. So you get the imagery? Jesus begins to say, I am the good shepherd, in a time in which the people are remembering the false shepherds of the past, the ones who had led people astray. And in the context of all those rebukes of false leaders, Jesus says, I'm the good shepherd. And He tells the people to follow Him. You know, as people who want to care for others, there are lots of bad examples out there of what to do. Lots of worldly thoughts. You can think of all the psychologies of the world that are out there that tell us what to do. And some of them are so far off base that they're just going to lead to problems and not resolve problems. There are people that we could follow that would lead us far astray from what God wants. Jesus says, if you want to care for sheep, if you want to care for people, look at me. I am the good shepherd. And that's what we're basing this whole soul care concept on, is Jesus as the good shepherd, the model that we are to follow. And we'll look at his life today and his words a little bit next week and other things that Jesus had taught and done. And we're going to learn to follow Jesus. But I want to take us to three main things that Jesus says about himself as the good shepherd, as key traits for a caring person. Three key traits of a caring person. So let's look at what Jesus says in verse 2 in particular. That one of the first trait that we want to look at of a caring person is that he or she respects proper process. It says here that Jesus talks about those who enter by the door, not going over the sides. You see, what they would do in those days is they would take an area of a field, maybe a place that had some natural barriers, like some rock cliffs or something, and the shepherds would bring the sheep into the area, and they would put a rock foundation around, a rock gate, really, not a foundation, but a gate of rocks. They would stay there. Different shepherds would use them at different times, and they would throw maybe some thorny bushes on the top. So they wouldn't make, something that's super high, but fairly low, but it had the thorny bushes that would keep any kind of wolves or any kind of predatory animals from coming in to where the flock were. And there'd be different shepherds would bring their sheep, and they'd bring them into this barrier, this containment, the sheepfold, really, and the sheep would be grazing in there and spending their time in there. And there was only supposed to be one way in. And the gatekeeper, who's probably a hired shepherd, would be there to guard who goes in and out amongst the sheep. You see? So the good shepherd says that those who respect the process, who go to the enters by the gates, those are the ones that follow, that we should be following. You see, it's possible for a person in trying to care for others to, in essence, go over the gate, find ways of helping people that aren't according to the proper process. And let me give some examples of that. Say we're here in church one day and someone comes and they begin to talk. Maybe they're from outside of the church. Maybe they're part of the church. I don't know. But just imagine a situation where someone comes in and you happen to begin to talk with them, and they begin to talk about some things in their life that are stressing them out and they're processing mentally. And say the husband or wife says, my relationship with my wife is just falling apart, or my relationship with my husband is just falling apart. And you listen to the story, and it sounds to you really, really bleak. It sounds like there's just no hope for this marriage. And you say to the person, well, you know what? You should leave him, or you should leave her. Your life won't really be right unless you do that. You need to just drop him or drop her and get divorced. When you do that, you're not following proper process. You're going over the gate to get someone. You're intruding into the process that really should happen. That person who's going through that kind of marriage conflict needs to work with somebody who can work on restoring their relationship with their spouse. Not driving them apart from their spouse, but work on restoring them. And to suggest, because you think it sounds hopeless, that they should leave, you've not gone over the proper process. You've disrespected the process. Another example, someone's visiting the church, and they're from another church, and they begin to talk, and they say, you know what? The church I was going to, or have been a member of, that's my home church, there is just all kinds of problems going there. I mean, the pastor is a real jerk, and he's done this or that. And you say, well, it sounds like a real jerk pastor, And you say, yeah, that guy needs to be corrected. And so you say, I'm going to go and talk to the elders. I'm going to go and talk to that pastor and say, you're really offending this person. You've not followed the proper process. you've disrespected the process, because that person needs to go back and talk to the pastor. So what your proper process is for you to come alongside them, to help them and encourage them to resolve the problem with their pastor. And that would be the proper role you should take. So Jesus says, if you want to follow me, and you want to follow what I think is a good shepherd, then you follow the proper process. You don't jump over the gate. So this respects the proper process of caring for people.